Stream was ready. How
Yeah,
rude.
they didn't ask stream if we're R. Oh, hello. We're in here. This is Bowser Hauser
And I'm Gubinator.
and we'll be your casters tonight for Montana Copper's game against Western State, Western. Oh my God, Western.
You got this, Sarah.
Western Colorado University Slate.
Way to go, you forgot it.
Thanks. Is there a way to turn down the game sound a bit? Is it this? I don't want to mix with. I don't want to. It'll just be loud. So it looks like University of Montana is running a Reinhardt, a Reaper, a Sim, a Mercy, and that is a Moira. I almost called her a Syndra from League of Legends.
Yeah, we call the characters the right things here,
Yeah.
hopefully. Yeah.
Then Western Colorado is playing Orisa. We see another. Oh my God.
A Reaper? Yeah. Got
I wanted to call him
and
Reinhardt.
A May on that side.
A
with,
May, and then a Lucio.
Lucio Ana, the classic duo.
Oh,
my favorite
Spongy
duo.
Boy. I love that name.
Okay, we have UMT playing this staircase here, trying and get in some damage. But
A
we're getting
Meowing gets walled
getting cut
off
here
and
with that wall.
antied.
Rez came through on the Reinhardt,
But the Mercy went down trying to res.
But we're still down a couple.
Yeah, we're down
heroes here. So
down 2 right here, but they might be able to get a pick on the Orisa maybe.
if we get that Orisa, we might be able to get this fight. But I'm not sure if the focus is there.
Yeah. The Reinhardt keeps getting walled off here. And the Reaper tries to fade out of the fight, but are they going to chase? It does not look like it. Oop.
Got a Junkrat
Alright.
hanging out in the back
Yeah.
line, and they get it.
Typical Junkrat things,
Yeah.
just hanging in that back line there. Looks like we switched to an Ana and a Kiriko here. Kiriko's so overpowered.
Yeah.
Especially when you have an Ana on the enemy team, it's just almost, it feels like a must to have a Kiriko at that point.
Definitely, yeah. Just with that total counter for her Nano, she's just become almost indispensable against Ana.
Yeah. And especially when you have a team that really likes to focus your tank with those nanos and walls. That is a big ult there.
Marissa really pulled out that ult.
What's
and,
her ult called? Like, what's it?
I don't know.
Surcharge? Surge.
Something charge.
Yeah,
I think.
surge charge.
It's too new.
Yeah, oh, and we have a Pharah now.
I guess we'll see what sort of damage we can get in with that Pharah. Maybe we can play off some big
I just feel like this is a hard map to play Pharah in. Just it's so close. There's not a lot of space for her to fly around, especially when you have characters such as Orisa and May, who can still get to you. But it looks like the University of Montana is going for a massive spam here. Oop. Pharah might be able to get a pick here on that Lucio. Unfortunate. And their Reaper, Colorado Reaper, had a huge ult there too. Looks like University of Montana is calling for a regroup here.
Definitely just take time to get back together. Maybe they can use
maybe
that
a little
Pharah to
too much time though.
get some angle. But that's
Waited
the end of
too
that round.
long, yeah.
So we'll see how well they're
there.
able to rally together and maybe make some composition changes to counter these guys a little better.
Yeah, I definitely think the Reinhardt could have been switched there, but they were close to ult that game, so I could see why they'd want to keep it. But I feel like into an Orisa, a Reinhardt's just not a great pick due to the fact that he's so close range and she can push you away pretty easily from the team. Just between her little swirly and then her javelin.
Right now, we're not seeing any comp changes from last round. We still got Moon on the Junkrats and Smash on the Nevermind. We have Smash changing over to Ash.
And then Colorado has changed to a Sim from the Reaper. Looks like they're going to try to go for a quick point touch.
I'm a little surprised on the Ash change for this map because this is such a strong Pharah map, but we'll see if they can pull some value out with the Ash. Challenging the May and that Sim with some range.
Oh, and my least favorite thing, a turreted Bastion. I'm seeing some aggressive Ana nades here. See, Kiriko's just so OP. I love her.
Yeah.
trying to learn her because Mercy just got the biggest nerf. It so sucks. It sucks. Ooh. An unfortunate timing for that nade. And the cleanse was almost up.
Yeah, and they've got to have a game plan going in with that, with this 3-plane sim, because you walk in there
and there's gonna be turrets everywhere.
They have all their aces with those
already
sim turrets.
picked up. So. Yeah, look at them. You can just see them sitting there waiting. I love when I play sim, but I hate when enemies play sim.
Isn't that what everyone says?
Yeah. Ooh, big Ash. Nope. So it looks like Reinhardt's going in on his own, but Kiriko TPs to him. University of Montana going for some high. Oh, and the Ash got picked off there. Playing alone. A little too alone there. Oop, got the DPS,
really
but not the Reinhardt, yeah. Oop, it looks like Rein's gonna just get walled off and picked there. Yeah. Ooh, nice pick by the Kiriko, though.
That was really just a series of picks, and it just kind of started to, you know, spiral from there.
A good old snowball moment for Colorado. Terra Surge. That's what chat just said. It's called a Terra Surge. It's Orissa's ult.
Thank you.
Cheese Crip. Ah! Cheese Crisp. Cheese cripping around. Bowser, whose fan? I'm Cheese's biggest fan. I love you, Cheese. See you Saturday.
They're really
good with that May wall.
Colorado's just kind of running this, like if you walk into a seal die sort of with the May and that sim, they just really have control out of whatever area they want to lock down. So hopefully Montana can figure out some sort of game plan for taking a round from them.
Yeah, Ash almost had that point there, but unfortunate.
That's it for this map, though.
The camera just went wing.
Yeah. So we'll see what Montana can do for our next map. So far, it's looking like it might be an exciting game.
Yeah, I think so too.
Some good opponents to test our skills on, looks like. So.
I wonder how Montana State's gonna, or not Montana State. Oh my gosh, that is our enemy.
Montana State, yeah.
The University of Montana will change up their comp next game.
I'd like to
turn down the game volume.
If I can get less game volume, figure out how to do that. Right.
We're still not muted. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to your favorite casters in the world.
That's
Obviously.
us, I guess.
Yeah. I just automatically label myself as
mean,
everyone's
This
favorite
this
caster.
might actually be like my second time casting a game ever, so I don't know about that. But
I hardly ever cast Overwatch games.
I never casted them because I almost always played in them. So
Yeah, same. I'm usually on League of Legends, sometimes Valorant, and that's it.
for anyone in the chat that doesn't know, I'm Cubinator. I played on Maroon or Tan or Varsity or
Whatever it's called
whatever
now.
the team was called. I played on a team every semester I came to college, and just this semester I'm taking a break. I got lots of cool work. So, but I'm still
Cubinator,
here,
you're
and
smart.
I'm hanging out, and I'm doing some casting and supporting the team.
Let's go. Yeah. Yeah, I've been on the team for, this would be my 4th semester on. Yeah, 4th
Something about
semester on
that.
it, about 2nd year almost. That's
So we're on what's this?
Midtown.
Midtown. That's
The new map.
Yeah. The sim telly right in front of them is sort of interesting.
Yeah. I think it was to do like a TV.
Yeah, that might have been a
Bomb.
little fluke.
Yeah, I think they messed up on accident.
I've definitely seen a strat where you TP right there and it's purely effective, but yeah.
And they switched off the sim and went Bastion. So, University of Montana is running a Lazy Rando on Sigma, Smash Inc. on Ash, Moonlit Star on Bastion, and then we have a Lucio for Chara, and then Athena is playing Kiriko, which I love a good Kiriko. Ooh, they got some people pretty low there.
We're only down 1 here, so
Yeah.
no guarantees yet. Without a risk of that low, we might be able. There it is, yeah. Got her, Kiriko. Her. God, what's it called again?
Flens.
I think she's so ground.
I call it Flens.
Blend.
Yeah.
Use that to save herself and her teleport to get out. So looks like they're kind of giving. They might end up just giving a point to them, like and
Yeah.
grouping
Playing
here on
safe.
second point of yeah.
I'd rather play second point full team than just randomly run into first point hoping to stop
At
them.
this point, I think it's really important that you regroup on second point midtown because
Yeah.
if you stagger into that first point and get picks,
And then someone's back at that last
they'll
spawn.
they'll be halfway through second point with that cart.
Yeah.
By the time their whole team gets back together, so
Yeah. I don't like the place that Montana is choosing to pick. I think high ground would have been much better for them to play off of.
Arista showing UMT,
And Lucio gets picked off.
showing UMT her strength, kind of going in. Arista has a lot of power in Overwatch 2, is able to really own the space and just kind of do as she wants. So she's a very high priority target.
Yes, I definitely just such. No sarcasm detected in my voice. She's too OP. I like the Hog nerf. I wish he was nerfed even more. Just nerf him into the ground. Get rid of him. Take him out of the game.
Let me know about the hog nerf. What was that?
Oh yeah, so the Hog nerf was that so it doesn't pull you all the way to him anymore. It leaves you at like a jump away.
Okay.
So he can't hook you and then shoot and punch.
Okay.
So he can't. It's no longer a one shot with a hook to squishies.
Right.
Unless I mean, some people were saying like there's hog tech you could do. Of like, I mean, you can still just like they're still stunned for the second, but I think the second's shorter now too. I don't remember by how much, but he can still just walk at you and shoot you and punch you.
Oh, we got the Reaper going up behind.
Ooh, big click on that Reaper there.
That's an interesting change for Hog because in the past they've just nerfed him by decreasing his damage so he can't get one shot. But I think increasing range is kind of a more dynamic way to make him more well-rounded and less all about those one-hit picks.
Yeah, I like the change to him. I see him a lot less, but now I'm seeing a lot of Orisa. And as someone who wishes they could still play Mercy, That Mercy chain. Oh, it hurt my heart. Did you read about that one?
I did.
So her cooldown is for her fly. What is it called? What's her fly typical called?
Guardian Angel.
Her Guardian Angel is now 2.5 seconds cooldown
wow.
instead of 1.5 seconds. So they upped it by a second. And then her jump back when she's in Guardian Angel, you know, when you can fly back up into the air, it does half the distance as a fly forward does.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so her movement was severely nerfed there.
Does that include her vertical Guardian
No, as
Angel
long as
jump?
you're flying forward, I'm pretty sure. So, like, if you hit Guardian Angel and then launch yourself up after someone, like a super boost, I forget what it's called, it's the same amount. But if you, like, one of the newer techs in Overwatch 2 for Mercy was since her Guardian Angel was so much easier to use, you would launch yourself at someone, and then you could immediately launch yourself backwards,
I see.
and that tech is now, like, unusable.
Okay, well, we're kind of getting down to the...
To the bare minimum here.
To the
Ooh,
very
big boost their ult.
chance
Hopefully they
for
can
UM
hold
to
here.
try and to hold this map. We'll see if the spawn proximity advantage gets them through.
Big pick on the Lucio there. Oh, but... Ooh, let's see if our tank will touch. Nice. Hopefully
Yeah,
he'll get the up.
they might be able to hold it. Like I said, that spawn point proximity advantage is pretty substantial on these payload maps.
Yeah,
So
almost got the junk rat. We got Winston ult here. Almost Bastion and Kiriko ult. They have... Ooh, they got some good ults there. They got Ana and Junk Fire and Lucio. So this will be an interesting fight to see here.
Colorado definitely has some more ults coming up, but if UMT
that jump tire, if used right, can be game changing right here.
if they can plan it right, then they can.
Looks like they are up
Pull it
2 right
off.
now. And that is
Lots of
a
ults coming
big
out,
Reaper
so
ult there.
It's gonna be hard to hold this, but with that Winston ult, he might
And
be
some
able
nice
to
monkey
hold
ult
it for
there.
long enough to get other
Ooh, but he
teammates
gets
back.
antied and melted. And so does the Lucio.
See if anyone else can touch point before it makes it.
I don't think so. Unfortunate. But Montana did get
Goes
them down to a
around.
minute and a half.
That's not a bad hold at all, actually.
I definitely think Montana here can pull this up. Pull it up by the bootstraps.
Hybrid,
You know,
I think hybrid maps are
hard.
they are hard, and they definitely put the players through the biggest emotional roller coaster that any Overwatch map can.
Have you played Push yet?
Yeah, I've played Push, yeah, but just with that payload, I feel like, especially because both teams play the full.
Seen that yet? Did you see that?
What are you looking?
It's the train times to leave for different maps. So there's Toronto and
Oh,
Kings
okay.
Row
I
and Monte Carlo,
okay.
Blitz World. Huh. Deep Run Tram. Oh. Our Salty Pops over here on tech just told us that Deep Run Tram is the tram system in World of Warcraft.
We love those cross-game references.
They do those sometimes with Riot games too.
Looks like they're going out right door, which means they're probably pulling a similar strat that Colorado did on their push, where they go through all the
The back.
buildings and don't go through the street. It really narrows their line of sight, so they can't take as much poke damage on their way.
Which is nice. This first push point here on Midtown, it's just, if you get stuck, it's so hard to push past.
It's very much a point of picks and rotations. You know?
Yeah.
If you get a pick, then you can make a really
Move.
clean rotation, or you just got to full send the rotation, hope you get around them without losing anybody, and then once you dominate the space, you dominate the round. So
Looks like Colorado kind of anticipated it. Oop, and our tank is
Definitely
going in on
just
the
trying to get
support,
out
but I
there.
think he's going to get
ends
melted
up,
there.
Yeah, ends up getting melted.
Ooh, and
Little
Kiriko
bit of
jumps in
damage
the
coming
back.
out for the positioning there.
Oop, and was able to get out of there. Very clean save by the Kiriko. But
Still put people on point,
Yeah.
so kind of a split team right here.
ooh, but they might get a pick on
Colorado's
the Orisa.
also split a little bit, so a couple of picks coming through on both sides. We'll see which team sort of pulls this with the most composure.
Oop, and Monkey's back. Gets melted immediately by that Bastion.
Yeah, it
That
seems
Bastion is just hard focus.
the Bastion is really taking control of those open spaces.
Yeah, the bash, I don't think monkeying to bash is great, just because the tankiness to bash skirt form is just really hard to deal with there.
Definitely.
I like the containers of applesauce there. Just in front of us, there's some applesauce. 224 containers of applesauce. That is 48 applesauce this thing right there.
We do have a couple picks here. It looks
Ooh,
like
I
we
think
might be able to
yeah,
pull
they are
through
up
this.
2 right now.
Colorado seems to be playing a little timidly, not too like overly aggressive.
Looks like they might try to give it to them.
Yeah, which
The
I
tank
think
is going to
that's.
push up and get some space
I
there.
think they're playing like that. I think it helped us kind of take over that point. Just
They might try to
for some
touch
reason
here.
they're not being as aggressive as.
Oop, and
like
they do
could
get a
be.
touch. Oop, and the tank.
Oh, they went to
goes down.
contest right in the last second. Okay. Not gonna lie, I didn't see that coming.
Sojourn almost gets a pick there. Moira goes down, and so does Kiriko.
It looks like they really pulled off that last second test, which I was not expecting. Here I am saying, oh, they're not playing very aggressive, and then they go for a
Then they
super
go
aggressive
in.
last second test, and they pull it off. So we'll see if UMT can finish up that.
UMT has about 3 ults here,
Finish up
and
that.
Colorado
point.
has 2. So let's hope that these are some big ults from UMT here. I feel like I was thinking this earlier, actually. That Moira ult could be game-changing right there.
We have Moonlit Star on a Tracer flank, picking the Reaper, and we're about even on picks right now, with the Ana half on the other team. With that Ana, then the heals will all be gone. It looks like this might be our point after all.
Hopefully, yeah. Ooh, that might be a big ult there. But Kiriko's able to save.
That was a really good Jericho cleanse to get those guys out of that Orisa pull.
Looks like Fontana is up right now.
I think
Yep,
we
and
have
they
it
are
right
able
here.
to
There we
cap
go.
that point.
Yeah, that was a really smart Jericho cleanse on that Orisa ult.
Yeah, that worked really well.
It was a good day when I figured out that I could cleanse my way out of
An ult.
Orisa ult. Yeah.
I wish, I was saying this earlier, I wish they like nerfed Orisa's, it's like they nerfed her Fortify, but like that's not the worst part about her.
True.
Like it did suck that she added 125 health when she fortified, but I wish her ult would not suck you in so much.
Right.
Like it would suck you in initially and then slow slightly. Ooh, and Reaper ults in the back line, getting 2.
Looks like just a little bit disorganized play there
yeah.
kind of led to us getting kicked off.
Yeah, I don't think there was much communication there on what was happening with Blink and stuff.
But second point here, I mean, second point, there's always lots of time to regroup.
Yeah, they got
So-
2 minutes still. I think Unimar's might stop this here. Oop, and Monk's jumping in. Kiriko gets a big pick there. Oop, and Kiriko gets picked there. Tracer trying to get some picks in the back line here. Oop, but no more.
I think we'll definitely be seeing this Orisa, Reaper, May sort of comp coming from Colorado a lot. It's just a really powerful comp, and unless you make the right counter picks, it's hard to get through. So.
I think Afar would be good here. They don't really have anything for high altitude or an Echo. Echo's been super powerful lately.
Yeah, some DPS to really get in there and sort of confuse them a bit while you're going in would help, and maybe even validate having the Winston. But if not, the Winston could be swapped for almost any other tank in this situation.
Yeah, I think the Winston's just getting melted way too much here. I don't even think it's... They're maybe debating on saving the ult here, but I think it would be best. Honestly, the best counter pick to an Orisa is Orisa.
Unfortunately, that's the
Yep.
case. Isn't it?
I do think like Azari is pretty good, especially if the Rissa is not good at like controlling her shooting.
This could be a good Zarya moment, just the lack of the range that the team has, but
I
it
think
looks like we're coming down to it, and we're going to see what we can do with the comp that we have. Icing up on that point to hold it for a little bit longer, but looks like it's going to come down.
a touch, but I don't think University of Montana. That is a good game from the University of Montana Copper and Western Colorado University State. We will be back for another game in a couple of minutes.
Hey there,
Oh,
welcome
we're
back. We're here for our third game on Circuit Royale with West Colorado University Slate and University of Montana Copper.
yes.
I was really shocked with how coherently I said that long sentence.
I've been saying stuff so coherently all night. If you haven't
Yep.
been.
Sarah is a phenomenal singer and an even
Yes.
better cast.
I aced public speaking. No, I never took it. Look at all those purses.
Yeah.
These are some kind of cool shops. Ooh, look at that
Oh,
bust.
what a display. No jewelry on
I
there.
know. Someone robbed it. And just a nice little dress there. Ooh, it's got a fan. Oop, and there's fighting happening.
Salty Pop's just taking us for a look around town.
They have this coming.
Oop.
So
Oh, never mind. There's not fighting. We can go back to exploring. I just heard a doom fist punch and assumed
Yeah.
it was fighting.
All right, well, we do have Athena on tank now for this round, playing some this, which I heard that she's cracked. So,
And a Miauka.
Miauka.
I don't know why I added a U in there, but I did. Is back in and now on support.
So we have Ana Kiriko again, which has been a pretty good. Like, we're not seeing a Kiriko on the other team right now. Our Ana might be able to get some pretty good value with Angie.
We see a Junkrat and a Hanzo. I have noticed Hanzos lately in comp have been
Doom
super
going-
overpowered. Ooh.
Doom's going right in the back line to try and pick up some of
Oop,
those
and we
supports.
don't have a Kiriko cleanse there.
Yeah, the Doom ends up getting focused a little too hard and gets picked. So,
Tracer's going for a pick on that Ana. But I don't think she will get it. She might be able to get out. Unfortunate.
but they just walked in with a bunch of food.
They went to Costco.
Oh, they went to Costco.
Yeah,
okay.
they were practicing earlier for the game
Yeah,
last
okay.
tonight, and they were like, yeah, there was someone in our game named Costco Dude, so we're going to Costco.
Yeah.
And just walked out.
Yeah, for context for those in chat, two guys from our tan team, just
Glacier
team, just walked in with an armload
Well,
of food
yes.
from Costco. So.
Costco hot dogs are great, and they're only $1.50 each with a drink, if y'all didn't know that.
Everything is great if it's
Yeah.
$1.50.
Run to Costco.
Alrighty, so we're here on second point. Oh, I forgot. Circuit Royale. That's
Circuit
what it's
Royale,
called,
yes. For some reason, you're really quiet for me in my headset. But when you speak, it's loud over there. So I don't know if it's just me. But that makes the game so loud for me.
That's just
Yeah, that's mine. That's oops.
Yeah,
I might put it up like right there.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no winning. And looks like University of Montana did win that team fight while we were messing around.
Yeah, look at us not paying attention when
know.
we do well.
But we switched Orisa off the Doom. Now we have a Sim. They switched a Sombra. And
I think the Sim is a good choice here. It's hard to super directly counter Sim, so it'll give them a lot of options for just holding down points. And they're holding the Orisa too, so we're kind of doing
Ana
what
gets
Colorado
hacked.
did us first round, just playing that team comp where we can just kind of lock down a position and hold it a little better. So.
And they're getting some good picks here on the University of Montana, and it looks like only the Orisa is left. Unfortunately, they might have another push here, hopefully.
I bet you that Sombra came out specifically to counter the Orisa. So they can walk forward, get that little damage on the Orisa, get Fortify out of there, just
Yeah.
make sure she doesn't use that,
And
and
she can't use her E either.
go over her. So yeah, probably one of the few like really good Orisa counters in the game right now.
Yeah.
Um,
I think she's good. Really, yeah, no one I can really think of right now is a great Orisa counter. I guess I would say a, what's he called? Bastion.
Yeah.
Because he can just go turret form and melt. If heals are out of the...
so
I think
basically,
Bastion's just a good counter to every tank. He's
Yeah.
just essentially a mini
That's true.
tank.
He kind of is the tank counter character.
Yeah.
More so the health counter character. You know, like, oh, you have health, not more this back. So
What used to be Bastion's ultimate in Overwatch 1? I forgot it.
he turned into a
The
mobile tank
Mobile tank.
and shot, you know, like cannonballs.
No, that's what he is right now in Overwatch 2.
No, he turns into a mortar and
Ah.
shoots.
I don't
kinda
know, for
AoE
some
shots from
reason,
the
even though I
sky.
played so much Overwatch 1, I cannot visualize or remember what Bastion's ult was.
Yeah, but in Overwatch 2, he can't move around while he's in ult. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he could move
And
around.
he
I
only has
remember
3
that.
shots, but
That it was shocking to be able to see his movement.
we do have a pick on their Sombra, so our Orisa should be able to hold together a little better. There's our Orisa.
Ooh,
Oh,
big
yeah,
pick
it
there.
is. Looks pretty even right now on
Yeah.
third point. I think that spawn proximity that we've been talking about and just having these close quarters with that sim are really coming together to give this team sort of run for their money on third point. So.
It looks like we're going to see Ifara come out from West Colorado Slate.
Farah is sort of an interesting point on this, or interesting pick on this map with Ash already on the team.
Yeah.
So we'll see what sort of value they get from that.
We just
So
gotta, University of Montana just gotta make sure that Ash focuses. That Farah that's shooting at. Oop, and we almost have Bob. Unfortunate.
We
gets
probably would have
Bob.
seen a Bob come out there if it
If-
wasn't for getting picked off right there.
That Moira orb, those stinky little
And-
Moira orbs.
Yeah, no support, so we'll probably be looking at a team wipe right here.
Mhm. Hopefully a major regroup from the University of Montana. They have 2 ults right now and 2 more coming up. Colorado has Nano and then about 2 more coming out too.
We'll probably see that Bob come out soon to hold point.
Hopefully. Hopefully. Nice.
There's the Bob coming out, and looks like we sent out our Nano too on our Orisa to keep her up for a little while. Orisa ended up with another
Ooh,
ult.
Orisa
Look
wins
at
up
that,
with a
2 more
big
picks,
ult
so
there.
yeah,
Looks like
they
it just might be
managed
the far there.
They managed to
Ooh,
turn that around for a little bit there.
Kiriko almost got that Farah. She should be pretty low. They can hear her. They know she's there.
So yeah, they're just kind of holding that point. You don't want anyone to go behind them and cap. So.
Ooh, trying to get an early pick on that Hanzo, and they were able to. That's pretty big for Montana there. Now they're up 1 this next fight.
Definitely holding together pretty strong on this third point.
Farah's probably looking for a flank here. She does have ult. So she's probably going to try to come behind here and ult them from behind. Yep.
There's that bar ult.
Ooh,
Called it.
big pick. She only got 1 though.
I think that that spear throw was a little what's the word? Uncalled for, but
Yeah.
it looked cool. So
And looks like
they got the picks that they might need to get through, but we'll see if University of Montana can hold together and hold them off.
hopefully they're able to touch
Sim
here.
touching the point
Yeah.
as best she can. We got more teammates coming up on point right now.
Ooh, we see a Widowmaker there too for this last push. Oop, and
That's
there's
a really interesting switch for the Widowmaker. Maybe
the
not totally sure.
ooh,
what
and it looks
for,
like
but
University of Montana is going to be
And
able
they
to
hold
hold
it.
them off there. Good hold from the University of Montana.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we can hear some clapping in that back room.
That would be
I didn't
understandable.
even half my headset is off,
Oh,
so
yeah. Definitely,
was-
very very cool of them to hold them off. What was it like? Just like a few meters away from the end there.
so hopefully University of Montana is able to get a full 3 push. Ooh, and we're going exploring again. Le Pink Room. Le Pink Rose. I called it room. Ooh, I like the music we hear. This is kind of like a snazzy little bar going on. Surprised all that alcohol survived that fight.
more in the map. This is a pretty map. I like it aesthetically.
I wish we were able to play Eloise?
Helios?
Yep. Because during the oh, look at the little Rapajaki! During the Olympus event, whatever character was played the most in Battle of Olympus arcade mode got a statue on Ilios.
Oh, really?
And it was Junker. Now there should be, I think that was the rule of it, but there should be a Junker statue as Zeus. That's a cool little road. Oh, yeah, that's a pretty little area. So University of Montana is running the SIG, or not the University of Montana, West Colorado is running the SIG again. University of Montana is running the Orisa. So the Ashe and the Sim again. We see a Bastion and a... So this is not a great room for University of Montana to fight in.
Definitely an interesting path to go through there. Just kind of getting bombarded by that truck grab.
Might be able to get a pick. Orisa being very aggressive here. But
I really
heals
like,
are getting pumped into her.
I really enjoy the Ashe pick on this map on attack. It just, there's a lot of long, straight stretches here for good damage, playing as any sniper on this map. So.
Oh, Widow's so overpowered on this map. I love playing on her.
Snipers are opportunistic characters. I don't consider them overpowered.
Or no, yeah.
They work in certain settings. And this is a setting where snipers work very well. So.
Yeah, I think especially from the changes of removing most of the shields in Overwatch 1 and getting rid of double tanks, snipers can definitely be pretty powerful on these open set maps.
True.
Especially Coliseum if you played that one, where the first half of push is just a long straightaway where you fight each other.
So we're playing a little bit more passively here now. I think we're probably looking for a pick before we push for guard.
Which I think is a great play here. But... Oop, and Ashe is looking to go up top here.
Ashe gonna take advantage of that high ground.
Orisa almost has ult here.
We'll see if she can take the space to use the process.
You can definitely see her wanting to push up here to use her ult. That was a nice nade. Ooh, we got it.
We ended up pulling out window from...
Oop, and we also are seeing a Bastion ult from the enemy team happening.
Multiple ults coming out right now.
This is definitely wanting to use her ult. But I don't think she's going to be able to get the space she wants.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
Oh, goodness. We'll see what that does.
Yep, Bastion is definitely...
Without getting a pick there, I think they might have the real estate to make a push here.
Ooh, and Bastion should be pretty low in the backline. Ooh, almost got the SIG there. I don't think Orisa realized the SIG was so low behind her at first.
They did end up picking the SIG, so they might be able to push through and get a couple more picks here.
I'm not sure if heals. There they are. Okay, they finally... I think both healers were dead there for a second, so they weren't able to push up.
Maybe if the Ashe is able to pressure that Bastion, get the distance from the space.
Ooh, good javelin on the Bastion. Was able to push him off the point there. Ooh.
They are gaining some ground on Colorado now.
Looking very promising for the University of Montana here. Colorado's looking pretty low. This might be a big Bob, but he gets slept. Oop, and he's awake again. Oop. He's unable to click the nade.
We have a tire ready. We might be able to make some headway with that as well.
They also have tire. Ooh, and our Bastion was able to get a pick there.
The Junkrat.
Or sorry, Junkrat. Thank you.
We all
Big diff, right?
Looks like they ended up getting enough picks there to kind of overrun us, but we might be able to make a point and cut.
Hopefully.
We need to take the objective now.
We'll see what happens.
Careful, we're outnumbered.
Nope, I don't think University of Montana is able to get there in time.
There it is, despite a really awesome hold, holding it a few meters before the end of this map.
West Colorado did the very same to us, held us a few meters before the
true.
first point.
That's true, yep.
Ooh, But University of Montana did get play of the game, so I count that as a win.
A small win for University
Yeah,
of
small
Montana
win.
Copper
Small
to
win
pull
here.
out a pog, a play of the game. Definitely a good fight between Colorado Slate and Copper from more exciting game. Yeah. Thanks for coming to the stream. We have,
And that is a very nice message.
yeah, we've got one more game going on tonight. We got
Glacier.
we have
University of Montana Glacier playing GFU Gold.
GFU Gold. That should be a very exciting game. GFU Gold is sort of a
rival of
an acclaimed
certain, yes.
rival of sorts for us. So should be a very exciting game with a lot of energy behind it. So
Yeah, we will be back in about an hour at 8 p.m. for that game. So stay tuned. And I will be playing, so you won't be hearing me, Caston. Goodbye.
Mics are off. Oh. I think they're on. Test, test. Yeah. No response, but response. So that oh they have a 3-minute delay. That's why. So they won't hear us until 3 minutes. Start talking.
Well,
Oh no, the enemy team will look at us. They're gonna see us babbling before with no idea what we're doing. I
I'm
should probably
that.
I don't.
On the positive,
That is a positive for sure.
guys, we are a
No,
absolute. I'm here.
I have it.
Well, I've had it like 5.
I just know I have one friend.
Cora.
Yeah,
Oh my.
yeah, you're my friend. My friend. Oh come on.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You're, my gosh. On starting top 5 capture as they should.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I'm impressed.
Jimmy Carter is
Absolutely.
absolutely the president.
Who
Not
is
the
still
current
alive?
president. Jimmy Carter is still alive.
Jimmy Carter
you
is
know?
still alive. Despite this land.
True. Hello.
It's not true.
He is
Still
right
alive.
there.
Carter is alive and well. Top 500. How do
I don't know.
How do I make the score not? Is GFU Gold already won on Oh. How long does the hold? Forever. Oh. Oh, left. Huh? So I just have to hit that? That's cool. Then what are these other buttons? Do they work? Do I have to say plus? I have a new friend. Bye. We were We're trying to ask chat if they can hear us. And now we're. Go.
Now arriving at Yijang Tower.
I don't know if that was.
Initiating
Well,
match.
might be someone subbing.
Uh,
So we will see. All right, it's crazy, isn't it?
I love the spectators. It's just the sword.
You have to wait until people load in. I think is how it works. It's
Just
very
fly
weird.
around.
Very
You
very.
just get to fly around.
Yeah,
like
you
a
can fly
statue.
around. Oh no, you have the good headset. I have a
I
crap headset.
intentionally I picked up that one, put it on, and then immediately picked up this one. So
Yeah. Your mic is a little far.
it's a little far.
It is.
I just don't want my mouth noise to get it.
That's okay.
A little bit of ASMR.
Oh, I didn't pick it up.
No,
Oh, I picked that up. I
It's
picked that up.
definitely picking that
I
up.
picked that up.
I don't like that.
Hello, stream. Oh, it is a little high on that. The game volume.
Yeah. You want me to turn it down?
Nah, it's fine. They
Okay.
don't need to listen to us.
But this is the mic. It's higher than. That's,
I know, but it wants to be. We should have it just slightly higher. Anyway, going off already.
oh wow.
We
Okay.
lost 2. Jimmy Carter alive still? Not anymore. 2 down for each, yeah?
Yeah, it looks like it.
All right. Bowser's pulling back. How do you feel about these comps here? I don't know nothing. I don't know nothing. I know very little about Overwatch 2 comps.
Yeah. You know, the Jimmy Carter Ryan is a staple. Ryan's kind of rough in the game right now, but Free's just good enough that it can sometimes just work. But we might see a switch as the game progresses if it doesn't end up working. And then, of course, if you have Ryan, you have Lucio.
Yeah.
And then on this map, Symmetra's really good. You can get on the point way early if you use her.
I'm gonna turn up just a little bit here. Why is this mic so quiet?
You have it away from your mouth, your face a little bit.
Yeah,
That's
it is,
better.
It is hard to get into my face because my
Oh.
head is really large. So, okay, that's a little better. There we go. It's going
Okay, we got
crazy
Pete
here.
going down. A lot of ults here. Okay, double pick there. Looks like about even now. Down 3 on both sides.
Bowser's going in. Oh, gets
Wow.
1 and then dies.
A trade there.
Very close.
But the Shlometra clears up the point. Getting contested by Lucio. I need to switch perspectives.
Commentating and spectating is hard. It's very hard.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job. Takes the point. 69% for
Yeah.
GFU. Oh, the names are switched. That's what I was.
Yep.
We can switch them later. That's not a big deal.
They all have GFU in their name. It's very fancy.
Yes. That is. It is hard because there's no like club feature or team feature inside of. Oh.
It
Is
costs
that
money to
Symmetra?
change
Is that
it.
what that is? Ooh, one
Big
down
shield
already.
going up. Big pick.
Gets no one. Is that was
Yeah,
that the original
yeah.
whiffs?
Big whiff there.
Ooh.
Double.
We love to, oh, we
Triple.
love to see it.
Big Shlum plays here.
Shalom.
Just cleaned them up. Beautiful work.
Zapped him. Is it a zap? They count, it's just like a little right. That's a zap.
It's a beam.
That's
yeah,
a zap.
It's a
Okay,
zap.
okay,
yeah, we'll call it a
Yeah,
zap.
thank you for giving that to me.
You really had to work that out of me. But
Yeah.
you got there.
It probably isn't a zap, but according to this stream, it is a zap.
It is a
folks.
zap now.
Okay, ult's going
okay,
down here
they're
for
bringing in that
GFU.
ult. They're not really pushing with it.
Do you have to stay in it for it to function appropriately?
You get a little bit.
Soul Knight goes down. Not great.
Oh, big ult there. big ult. That'll clear the point quick.
And Jimmy Carter goes down as well. So 69 to 72%.
Pretty
Montana's
close
gonna
game
move.
there.
Yeah, very close game.
Probably gonna see a Symmetra play here. Working that TP up onto that high area. It looks like they were told to hold it though.
85%. They have a little bit of time. Little bit of time.
Little bit of time. Try and get some poking in here. Those Symmetra turrets make walking through that gate a death trap.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Plum just goes in.
Nice.
GB
Good
loses
pick
one.
there. Good pick. Okay.
Montana loses one.
About equal there.
Ults are going down. Jimmy Carter is low. Ooh, the beat.
That's a big beat.
Here we go.
That'll keep him
We
in.
love to see it. Slum is holding on to the ult here.
I'd like to see that ult get played. Couldn't make it happen.
Slum dies. Very low on GFU. Only Orisa left. And Montana takes the point back at 99.
Nice.
So Ultimate economy is looking pretty good for GFU.
They
Only up one, and then yeah, everything's really close for
Yeah.
all the other supports. Yeah, so we'll see.
Yeah. We're going to see probably both those Symmetra ults get popped about the same time. It's going to make
What is
quite
it?
the chaos.
I don't know what it does.
It's a big, big shield across the whole
Okay,
map.
gotcha.
A lot of hell.
One going down there.
Okay, yeah, we saw the double ult there. That's very smart.
It's crazy out here.
It's hard to hit people with
Get
that.
one. Solmac can ult. They pop it.
Big ult there.
Solmac's got one. Slum got another. Here we go. Montana's taking it.
Montana's got it.
What was that?
I don't know what that was.
Was that me?
I don't know.
Was that
But,
you?
but Montana took it. They took it home.
All right.
It's just round one. We have to do that again, but I believe.
Mm-hmm.
0 to 1.
A GR right there. Not so bad. Bowser Hauser is the captain
You count on
That is
him?
of
correct.
Glacier, so they are allowed to say GR. There is some rules from the University of Montana to prevent any unwanted potential, like construed BM, I guess you'd call it, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
someone said something that was like in the wrong, we don't want that to be construed the wrong way. So generally, captains are the ones that's
Yep.
as a captain of Thomper, who played earlier.
Yes.
Yeah, you know that very well, right?
Well, we all ended up saying GR. So after every round.
That's
They
good
all
manner,
said it,
right?
and so we just ended up saying it.
Yeah,
And
that's what it
I would
is.
rather that than I get on people.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I think not everyone knew that, like, you say GM instead of GG.
Yeah.
We lost, so it wasn't BM.
Yeah.
If we won, it would be a little bit different, but
Yeah. Ooh, this is looking pretty intense for Montana here.
Just walking through them.
Just Jimmy Carter swinging the staff, the Orisa staff. Two dead.
The
Slum goes
javelin,
down.
yeah.
Is it a javelin?
Ooh!
Oh my goodness!
Oh, what a spear. Absolutely cleaned them up.
Oh, GFU didn't know what was happening right there.
I love Orisa.
She's
so cool.
very cool. They've nerfed her, right? And she's
Yeah,
still
she's
really
still
strong.
unkillable.
Yeah.
Now they're going Zarya here, and Zarya is a pretty solid counter against
Really?
Orisa. Yeah, you just ended up charging her because you're shooting so much
Yeah,
into the enemy team that she just stands in front, soaks up on her shield, and then can kill you pretty quick.
Interesting.
See this? Now Orisa just can't shoot. She just gets up in their face and she can't shoot.
Very interesting.
But Jimmy Carter's just going in. Jimmy Carter's just walking past their tank. Ended up getting him
goes
killed,
down,
but is the way to play against Orisa. Or Zarya.
Very interesting. So is there an answer then if they counterpick with Zarya?
Not really. Zarya's just a weird tank.
Yeah,
I
fair.
could see playing dive and just trying to get past her. And you could still play Orisa against her. It's not a hard counter. It's
But
just,
it just works
it,
well.
it
into-
makes you have to change how you're playing.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, good ult economy for both teams. 3-2 here.
Seeing an early ult there. Two ults here. Early pick for GFU. A lot of ults coming out.
Tank goes down though. Oh, but
All right.
lots of deaths on both sides. Very
Pretty even. This is
yeah.
winnable for both teams. Pretty even still.
Very evenly matched game. Great to see. We love to see it.
Absolutely. I'm watching the wrong team.
You're on global. You're allowed to. As long as they gave us global spectate, that's not a big deal.
It's just hard to figure out who I. F5 goes to their support. I need to remember that.
That is really. That's
Yeah.
very strange.
Because it's goofy. That's a
Beat
lot
from
of ults
Montana.
coming
That
out.
is a ton of ults. Something needs to happen from either side. GFU's getting kind of low.
Schlum just getting right up in there.
Pretty darn good ult from GFU.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That is a lot of ults from both
maybe
teams.
a little aggressive on the ult economy and usage from Montana, but they were
Yeah.
trying to make a play, right? There's
Yeah,
nothing wrong with trying to make
I
a
just
play.
wonder how much of that was communicated.
Yeah, true.
We are seeing a monkey come out, trying to get into their back line.
It's one. Ooh, frequency on the Sojourn. We'd love to see it. I was just commenting earlier that I love watching Sojourn play. So this is advantage here. Frequency taking not quite another kill. Montana's kind of low, but healed up quick.
Seen an ult come out of GFU. Counter ult. Or no, that's just double ult. My bad. Ooh.
Each lose one.
Little
GFU
side
loses
action
two,
there.
actually.
Wow.
Montana cleans? Wow.
That was close.
That was
but
very
they got
close. And Montana has a lot of ults coming up really soon.
it. Yes. Yes.
This is a great position for the University of Montana.
Absolutely. But they're at 50%. GFU is at 99. They're going to need a couple fights here. Hopefully they plan out these ults. They don't use them all at once.
This is very scary from
Ooh.
Jimmy Carter. Just
Big
ults
ult
right
there.
in the middle. Oh no, people have gone down here.
Yeah, GFU's
Jimmy
tearing
Carter.
through with that Kiriko ult. One of the best ults in the game. But Monkey's making something work here. He's at least contesting.
Then
Can they get
GFU,
onto
They got
point?
a touch here. Well, they did touch.
Okay, Schlum hit the ult, try and get on point. That's the wrong team.
And it looks
All
like
right. Oh,
GFU
they weren't
oh,
able to touch. That's all
Very,
right. That was
very
close.
close, yeah.
Very close. This is a very close game.
very, very close.
Score 1-1.
All right.
Ready for battle.
It's pretty exciting. I think a DPS and a support got picked without using ult in that last bit, I think is what happened. They died incredibly fast.
Yeah.
So that was very unfortunate.
Well, I think Kiriko ult came out and then people got picked.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Kiriko ult just makes everyone just dies faster.
Yeah.
Just can't out heal. But we're seeing the Rhine come back out. Rhine and Shlometra. Shlometra's also good on this. Symmetra's also good on this map, getting right on the point. Let's see if they utilize that. They did. Whole team on point. GFU did not do so with their Symmetra.
Is kind of going back and forth here. Bowser Hauser does go down.
This is a hard point to hold, especially from this angle.
Carter without shield. GFU loses one.
That's Zarya's low.
GFU
They're all
loses
low.
two more.
Wow. They're cleaning up here.
All right,
Pretty good.
okay.
All right, GFU backs
That was
up.
Pretty straightforward. Oddly enough, actually, because it looked like, you know, we lost one early, but
Yeah. Yeah. Jimmy Carter was down to like 75 health.
yeah. And it was
And,
like just towing the shield being almost gone as well.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive work there.
Yeah. They're very good at watching their health and repositioning when they need to. Jimmy Carter can really survive even without any supports. Can do a lot without getting heals.
Just kind of dancing around the pillar here for both
Yeah.
teams.
Swinging that hammer. Backing up. Doing a lot of nice. That's a early pick on Zarya.
Just kind of running over the team.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely just walk through them.
So was there an Solmac uses their ult, but that was
Yeah.
actually zero
Yeah.
ult economy
I was-
from anyone else. Used.
I was expecting a shadow there, but
I was literally like breathing in, waiting
Yep.
for it. I was like, is he gonna shatter? I should have said
didn't need
something,
to.
but
Didn't need to.
Didn't need to. Apparently, swinging the hammer when GFU
Yeah.
just runs around in a circle, it works well.
Yeah, absolutely read that position very well.
Oh,
Huge shatter.
we love to see it. Oh, knocked one off? Is that what?
They didn't.
No,
fall.
not quite.
Almost.
I think every ult was popped there. Ooh, Bowser Hauser goes down, unfortunately.
Lot of ults here.
Oh,
I don't know
very
what happened
unfortunate.
there.
Does Brian Shark get canceled by Zarya ult? Is that
No, I think that was Sojourn's E ability. I think that has a slight pull to it. And
oh,
just,
so
and
it'll
it
pull
pulled
you
out of
out.
charge.
Interesting.
And then
Interesting stuff.
Might have canceled.
Yeah. Frequency almost with the Reaper ult. Bowser Hauser just about to get beat.
F6 doesn't do anything.
So here at the University of Montana, we struggle a little bit with spectating Overwatch. I don't know if any other people deal with spectating Overwatch, but it is not a great experience.
No. Simturt's doing a lot for GFU right now.
But GFU just getting annihilated by Frequency.
Huge.
Uh,
Huge Reaper play there.
pretty darn good there.
Yeah.
No ults for GFU, and one or maybe two
no,
ults coming.
They popped the symbol.
I meant coming up. Sorry, excuse me.
Oh,
they did
okay.
use Simmel. Yes, you are
Yeah.
correct. All right,
Okay.
Montana. Give them the business. Overtime here. There's a ball.
Yeah, they definitely went with
Bowser
Speedy
Hazard
Jagged
does
here.
go down immediately. GFU loses one. 4 to
Did hear
4.
a shadow there. Nothing from it. Reaper got one.
There's a Ferret in the mix.
Okay.
3 down, 2 down, 1 left for GFU. This is
Just
ball.
ball.
Doing ball stuff? Nope, not
And
doing ball
balls
stuff.
down.
This might be game 1.
That's game 1 for Montana.
Here we go. We're doing it.
I hit the button.
Did you hit the button?
I hit the button.
Oh,
Look.
we should switch them though. Play? Wait, Solmac gets play. I don't. Where was this? Oh, this is what cleared him the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Wow,
wiped
incredible. Great play. Great play.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't see the play because it didn't pop.
Oh.
Do you want to switch?
Let's mute real quick. So
Okay.
goodbye stream for 1 second.
Hello, good stream.
Hello stream. It is
We-
Cascas.
we-
Eth.
That's correct. We talked about a lot. We talked about our feeling. Talked
Yeah.
about
Also, so like typing and cutting and pasting, I guess. More important.
Yeah, but mostly our.
Well, yeah, that's true.
There was a
And-
lot of feeling.
You know, I'm all about feeling. Yeah. I actually. No, it's fine.
What?
Tell them.
I'm confused. Ryan,
Don't be.
you're confusing me.
Why would you be confused? They'll be
I-
fine.
I don't know what's going on.
Ugh. Midtown. It looks like. Oh, people bringing back some stuff. We are live from the University of Montana, University Center Gaming Den. It's a
That is
little bit of a
correct.
mouthful. Wait,
A lot of words.
UMTUC.
I don't want to memorize that.
You-
I just say UC Gaming then.
Yeah, that is much smoother.
Yeah.
What did they? I don't, and did they ban? Did they say a ban?
Ban. Oh. Oh. They
Oh,
banned
we
Midtown.
bound mid. Yeah, that's
Winner
okay.
ban.
Yeah, it was very confusing because Young Blitz was like, oh,
Speaking of which,
speaking of which, are they? They might be coming back.
no way.
Maybe we
This
should.
is
Mute.
so-
Well, let's
Okay.
talk about our feelings more.
Cool.
Hello.
That was so cool.
What was
The
You
whole
muting?
talk.
the feelings?
How we said words. I'm a big
Well, it
fan
was
of
re-
words.
really loud.
That was awesome. You just rip. Let it
No,
rip.
no, no,
Just let it rip. Why not?
Don't leave. Well, 3 years, geez, 3 minutes from now, we will be back. 3 minutes from now, you'll
Yeah,
hear.
thanks for letting them know. Thanks for letting them know that in 3 minutes. How are they?
What do you mean? How not? They're just doing it. Great.
You're an interesting person.
They're interesting. Oh, thanks. But they must not be streaming. I thought maybe they have a different. Maybe they only stick. Oh,
You want to pick?
okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Winner band. Pick snap.
I don't know if they know that we know. You know what I mean? That was a lot of no's in one sentence.
That's a lot of. That's useful. It's useful to get it in steps.
It is useful to get steps.
I didn't know.
That's fair.
So what if I was the captain of Glacier?
Yes, true. Yeah, you're
Then
right.
this would be really helpful for
Yeah,
me.
thank you.
Bowser Hauser just happens to know all
N3
this
Ready
information.
Bird.
Can I just say
Sure.
R?
Yep.
I don't want to type the whole word.
How dare.
Words are hard, but
They-
I like
yeah.
words. But they're also different.
They are very. All right, give me. So Solmac. Oh, there's a person. We might need another chair though for said person. Because I will do the spectating if you'd like to come. So that means you have to get yourself a chair, please.
Wow.
Initiating
Wow.
I can't hear you. It's too loud. We're initiating the game or whatever.
There's cool Blizzard music. Isn't this from a game? This
Like a Blizzard game?
yeah,
The music.
the music.
Oh,
It's like Blizzard-esque,
it's very Blizzard-esque.
which is I guess the point. But
It- it is
it
the
would
point.
also make sense if they just pulled music from like World of Warcraft.
That would be cool, but I do not think they did. I think this is
I
Overwatch
think
specific.
in the map you can find
music.
music.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
I wouldn't
Oh.
be surprised if
So
that's the case.
let's mute real quick.
Okay. Nope, wrong team.
Oh, that's the wrong team. And then we're gonna mute. We'll be right back.
My day for charging and hitting things.
more field research. Grand.
Hello.
Hello. I'm back.
One. Attackers
I didn't want to burp the mic.
objective A.
Or right. This is the fun part where you don't know what to say. Oh,
Where?
that's
Yeah.
a big. All right, right on the point with the Symmetra teleporter there. Jimmy Carter coming up from behind on the high ground. Going after that Widow. Widow gets a pick. Our Widow gets a pick.
And
Okay.
another on their own.
Wow.
Both supports down for their team.
Love the death cam of our Widow. That's great. The third person's better. Can we stay the third person? Do you remember? Man, I love Overwatch.
Overwatch
There we go.
spectating is
Third person's a
10 out
little
of
easier
10.
to see. Ooh. Low there. The ult's coming up.
Oh, with the
See,
TP
Diva ult
up.
is coming up soon. Nice pick there. Got that Kiriko. Nice. Yep, there's ult.
And the bomb.
Got none from that. And that's going to be Diva. They're going to go for a big stagger here, probably. Or just keep her at baby. They're going to keep her at baby.
Keep her baby. Well, if she dies, she could potentially get Mac back, come back so much faster.
Right.
Keep her baby and make it easy. Next fight.
Absolutely. We have Shatter. We're going to have Beat and Coalesce from Glacier. GFU has Kiriko ult sort of coming up. Oh wow, okay.
Jimmy Carter is going absolutely
Walking
insane.
through the enemy team.
As he should.
Just absolutely going to their spawn. We'd love to see it. Creating a lot of space here.
That is one of Jimmy Carter's best attributes. Is he is amazing at making and keeping space for his team,
Definitely. That's one of
allowing
the
them
most
to
important
just
things.
get the final picks.
Yeah,
Once enemies are low, it's beautiful. It works really well for this team.
yeah, look at that. And then just backing out right when he's a little bit low. Walked into his spawn
As
and
he
then walked out.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
He's honestly amazing.
Just queening through them. Ridiculous.
That is a great way to tell a good tank from a bad tank, is seeing when they know how to pull out because of their health.
Absolutely.
And that he is absolutely amazing when it comes to knowing when to initiate these fights and to back out.
Absolutely. All right, looks like they switched to Ryan here. Doesn't do too much as just walks
and
past
both
him.
supports
They had a
completely
leave.
ignoring
They had
him.
someone leave.
Oh,
Have to pause for that.
rough. Was that one? Yes.
Game crash. Ooh.
Un-
That is rough. Not fun, but I don't know how this works. Okay. All right. Potentially 15 minutes. Wouldn't that be so much
Oh my
fun?
gosh, that'll be so great. We're
That is
so
so
good at
cool.
talking to each other too that we can for sure fill
Definitely.
15 whole minutes.
All right. So what are we talking about?
Well, Overwatch. You
Okay.
know, it is a game
Well,
that you and I both play,
that is correct.
and
I
we
just
also
played.
watch. You did just
Yeah.
watch. How did that go?
It happened.
It did
Yeah, I
happen.
think it was
That's-
a great learning experience. I think the
well, and
team
that's a majority of your team too are freshmen, first
absolutely.
timers when it comes to playing with esports. So the first games can be rough with them just now experiencing the NECC experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it was a good It was a good welcoming. I think fighting a team that's a little bit more experienced and has been around a little bit longer and might just be at the highest rank of the division means that we get a chance to learn the hard way, so that our next games against easier opponents, we're just gonna do something that much better. You
Well,
know,
exactly. And sometimes the best ways for you to learn types of games is to just get complete.
absolutely, absolutely. The people on Glacier have had that happen. They have
Oh,
been
yeah.
they've been smushed a billion times, so they are coming into
Almost
this.
straight for full seasons.
Absolutely, yeah.
And look at them now. Well,
Ooh,
Jimmy
an
Carter
uwu
mainly.
in the chat.
An uwu in the chat. We are here for
They
this.
boost screen?
They boost her.
Dang, that's not great.
I think we're just being proof that none of us touch grass. That's what I'm
That is correct.
Look at the
What is
faces,
grass?
the uwu.
What color is grass?
Blue, I think. Like the screen.
One of the same shade.
Probably. They are one
You
and
got
the
a problem
same.
with our commentary, Ryan?
We are
You wanna
currently
come
being
over here?
judged, and personally don't appreciate it.
I will dox Ryan on it on any day. They can just look it up and find your name. It's not that hard.
We are 100% doxing this man right now, but
Yep.
that's okay.
What's your home address so I can say it out loud?
SSN. Just point it out.
I know, we're ready. We're ready.
They don't have it. Oh,
He's in. He just has to
He
pick his
is in.
hero. Yeah, that's
the
a team
unfortunate
kill.
part was that we were not able to fully revel in that ultimate from Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
That was
That is a
beautiful.
shame.
Running right past most of the team, going straight
Yeah.
for the supports, and getting both of them.
Absolutely. Big wall here. Popping
Look at
two
that,
ults
and we
there.
see him pulling back out with his health going down. It's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Using that sim wall for exactly what it's for. Down one. Is still winnable. They do have Cole they could use here.
Do have full.
Enemy team is up 3 ults, so they need to be careful
They are
here.
up
They
3
may be
ults.
playing a little bit slower.
has been doing a great job building their ults, though.
Absolutely.
Jimmy's already back up to 70%.
Yup.
Trying to run straight past the tank again.
Turned around beautifully for that ult.
Oh, gorgeous. That was a good getaway for
Beautiful.
Sojourn, except she did give up touch.
She did C9.
She did C9. But
A shame.
if it wouldn't have been C9ing, would have been a great getaway.
Oh yeah.
Not to defend the other parent, but you know,
I think
You
we have to
gotta
be
give 'em
we have to be a
credit.
little impartial.
gotta give them credit where it's due, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And in this game, okay. That was mean. That was so mean. I take it back. I'm sorry. GFU, if you're watching, you guys are great. You guys are
GFU,
doing really well.
we
It's
love
actually
you.
really
We adore
close.
you.
First game was really close. And I think that we could see a pretty close. We
Oh
could
my
see this
gosh,
going
looking
to.
at the underworld at the moment,
Wow.
apparently. Thank you, Ryan.
Just giving us the best sights.
Cast.
We could be looking at the Ferris wheel, but he picks the darkest depths to look at.
As he should. Oh, what are those pictures?
Ooh, postcards from the other maps.
Those are from the other
It's
maps.
from Eichenwald.
Yeah,
And
oh, wait.
That's Eichenwald.
That is Eichenwald, but
What
different
is that?
Eichenwald.
Oh, these are like old.
Maybe. That's for sure Eichenwald, but it's a different throne.
I like. Is that Diablo backpack?
Oh, are those from different games? Those might be.
Oh.
That would make some.
We're just
Guys,
Overwatch
we
build.
are really good at playing Overwatch.
We're really
but
good at
no other games.
Exactly.
Looks like we are going. This seems to be the sweet spot for this team's comp.
Yeah. Look at that. Doing the little wall peek.
Looks a little funky on our end, but I promise he knows what
Absolutely.
he is a genius. We do not mess around over here at the University of Montana.
This is a Jimmy Carter play for real.
Like the other team might have gone a deep dive bomb.
Ooh, wow. Yep.
Update,
going
they
with the
for sure win
monkey.
a dive comp. Targeting Jimmy Carter first.
Smart play, but they could not pull it off.
Cannot.
There goes their tank. That is a team wipe. Yeah,
That is
that's
a
a team
team
kill. Wow.
One of the most insane things that you guys do not get exposure to is the shot calling that happens in this game.
Absolutely. I'm
Jimmy
sure
Carter
if we
is-
open that door,
Oh,
we could
he's
hear
going
it.
insane back there.
Yeah.
Like, he knows everything that is happening on this map. He knows. He can call out cooldowns. He knows where people are, who to target first, who's low. It's amazing. So,
Sniper gameplay there. Nice.
which makes
down.
it hard to dive comp onto him because he will call who he needs to call to go down on.
Absolutely.
And his team will follow in suit.
Yeah. If you follow
Ooh, our
Jimmy
Widow
Carter,
gets
you'll
the
win.
pick on Tracer.
Ooh.
That is a hard
Nice.
shot to make.
Absolutely. Wow. Just walking through everyone.
Honestly, Jimmy Carter's strong too.
Yup. It's the Ryan play. Just walk into the enemy and then back out. Save your charge to get out, honestly.
As you should.
No one can hide from my sight.
Jimmy Carter doing the wall peek while we've got walls coming. Widow. Love that. Oh. Are floating.
The Shlometra. Love to see it.
Schlum is a terrifying DPS. He gets in your
Absolutely.
back line. Dead. Gone for.
Yup. I agree. Got quite a few ults on both teams. This could be a hectic fight coming up. Ooh, pops it first.
Oh.
That makes sense. They won't get a chance to use their
massive
ults
ult.
because
Holy.
that was one ult.
One ult.
That was one ult. There is still 3 ults. Oh,
I think we used
still not, yeah.
Moira. Yeah.
But still,
But
a
that
team
was
wipe for 2
kind of
ults
just like
in
one
3
ult.
seconds. It's pretty effective. But GFU still has almost 5 ults. So we could see a quick change of pace here.
I think it really depends on how sparingly they use it. Because we, as a team, build up our ults pretty quick, and if they use them all at once,
Yeah.
could potentially not work out well for them. Jimmy Carter focusing was Moira, now Lucio.
Wow.
Trying
nice
to get
boop
rid
there.
of the beat threat, most likely.
Yeah. GFU held that beat for a while, but they have another fight here. They can regroup.
They are back down to 2 ults, though.
Wow. The spray.
Jimmy.
The spray. I'm calling it out. The spray. Beautiful.
And the hello.
It's
We're
legal
here-
now.
We're here to call you out, mister. Jimmy's about to get his ult back. Oh,
Nice.
and solos the Reaper. Moira's down.
Ah.
Oh. We
right on
lose
overtime.
Jimmy.
Still
Oh,
winnable.
Look at
That's it.
Hey! Nice.
Double pick from
Beautiful.
Widow. Beautiful. Beautiful end of the game. Wow. Let's see. Did Jimmy Carter play the game?
Top
Top
500 flag bearer. Oh yeah, if nobody was aware, he is a top 500 capture the flag. I'm just saying. Respect is due. Oh,
Nice. Nice.
Jimmy.
That's
My
cool.
man.
That's cool.
That was a good play. Honestly, he deserved
Deserved.
that.
Deserved.
Deserved. Here for that though, Jim. We are on. Oh, Mr. Streamer, Cast man. I have a spectator's opinion. Tell Cast I would love to see POVs from the rest of Lamau. Coming
Ooh,
from
a
our
big
very
Lamau.
own Cheese Crip 29 in personal DMs
Uh-oh.
to me.
Uh-oh. Ryan is typing in chat.
I can't.
We only do POVs of Jimmy Carter.
I mean, honestly, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Jimmy makes some big plays. Look,
We
I'm just
get
trying
that and
to.
a little bit of Slimetra, and that's all we get.
We got some Bowser Hauser for
We
like 2
did.
seconds at the end there
We
because Jimmy
did.
died.
I think we saw one snipe. And
One
first
snipe,
person.
yes.
Which was the first person was cool.
Which it's kind of meh on Widow in third person. I feel like
Yeah.
we should avoid that one.
Yeah.
Personally.
I mean, I think it's great, but
I'm sure you do. Look, I'm just trying to speak out for the people here.
I don't
I've
think
been
anyone has
given
a problem with
comment,
it.
and I was trying to move. Cheese Crip 29 did
I
have a
meant
problem with it.
other things, but
Oh, that thing?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't think most people do. It's a little distracting. What can I say?
yeah, I get that.
Oh, and it looks like we're taking a 5 break.
We will be right
Oh.
back.
Yep.
Thank you so much for the countdown, Ryan.
Oh my
It's really
gosh.
useful.
Hey, chat.
Hi, chat.
What is up? Hold on, pausing so that we can read. We can't talk at the same time.
Whoa.
Your stuff to me,
No.
but I'm up here.
Yeah. Give it to.
Well, Sarah. I mean Bowser. What?
It's so hard not to use real name.
It-
I feel bad about Jimmy Carter. Well, because we called Jimmy Carter he.
We'll change it. Okay, don't abuse. Did anybody else just hear how I said that? Abuse.
Yeah, because it's Bowser. That makes sense.
Haha. No, I did that on purpose.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yep.
I am
It was
that
a play
funny.
on words.
Yeah, exactly.
You're so cool.
I'm really happy that everybody noticed how smart I am and that I purposely did that.
You're so cool.
I'm getting nods from. I'm scared to bend. Do I sound better now? Oh my
Yes.
gosh, that's so crazy, guys. I know what I'm
This
doing.
is so cool.
Anyway, Cora, what's going on in your life? How's school treating you?
It's cool, I guess.
School's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty easy, honestly. All my classes are easy, which is nice.
You're in college, right?
Yeah.
Isn't college not supposed to be easy?
I just have. You still have 5-minute break on the screen.
Yeah, Cass. Come on.
Come on.
We are a professional
We
stream.
gotta. Spectator options just popping out. Can you believe this guy? This is
Cannot believe
ridiculous.
it. Oh, and we are. This is. How are you liking this map, Trimbali Monastery?
I hate it.
You hate
I'm
it?
not a fan.
Not gonna lie,
not
I
a
kind of
fan.
love it.
Really?
Although this is coming from a former Mercy main. F in chat for Mercy.
Rest in peace, Mercy.
Honestly, rest in peace.
It's
But this is
honestly better to just use her Glock now.
exactly. But back when she could fly whenever she wanted to, this map was amazing for her because there's so many covers to dive behind and
Yeah,
so much high ground to get up on.
definitely.
It's a very good sneaky map for people who don't want to, get shot at.
Yeah, definitely.
Specifically support.
Pharah's pretty good on there.
Pharah is
yeah.
really good on it.
Yeah.
For the similar reasons for Mercy. Sorry, I got distracted by our Venom mine placement. Weirdly enough, I don't think the enemy team will be walking over that.
It's tactical. Very
It's
tactical.
tactical. Just to make sure they're not flanking us from our spawn. Love getting this Widow action. Stared down the Orisa. Orisa did nothing about it. Oh.
Ooh.
Oh, what a shot.
Nice little pick there. Ooh.
Oh. Oh, unfortunate. But
Hey,
she dies anyway.
made it work. Nice little team kill there.
Beautiful.
Just a little team kill.
Just a little one. Don't even worry about it, guys.
We're getting too cocky.
We're not getting caught. Well, maybe a little bit.
I really hope they're not watching.
We are the
I feel so bad.
No. But you see, here's the thing. We are the streamers. We're allowed to be cocky.
I don't know if we can.
The players can't be jerks.
I think they can.
I think we just have different philosophies, which means either way, we're right.
I don't think that's how it works. One of us is maybe closer to right.
And it's me.
I don't know. All right. Nice little pick there on the Sojourn. Ooh.
Oh.
Ooh.
Slum on the Symmetra.
Yeah.
Love. I
That's
cannot
two
say
picks there.
Symmetra by itself anymore.
No,
It's kind of
it's
impossible.
Just, yeah, I literally said it. We were
Symmetra.
talking about it. I said
Yeah.
Symmetra. All right.
Going full beam.
That's the whole team. They came back in time, but it's hard to commentate when it's a sweep like this. It's a little hard to. They just all die.
See, now you're getting a little.
I'm almost disappointed. Yeah. Yeah.
See, guys, I really don't think I'm the mean one here. I think I'm
I'm
the
the
one
mean
who tells the truth, and I think
I'm telling
Cora's
the truth,
the one who
and
gets
that it is
cocky,
actually getting difficult
personally.
to talk about the game. That's
GFU,
the
we
truth.
love you and we respect
Oh, I
you.
never said I didn't love them.
I
words in
speak
my
for
mouth.
the entire university.
Yeah. This Tracer could be an issue here.
I
Getting
don't-
in
Oh?
between. Doing some damage. Distracting.
No, but our DPS.
but
Oh wait, hold on. My eyes itchy. I
Solmac-
can talk again.
Solmac is clearing enemy team with that ult.
Our DPS are fully aware of Tracer though.
Yeah. Nice. Full
Every time
snipe
she
there.
uses
Yeah.
her, what is it
Double
called?
snipe.
When she goes "Woo," back in time and she gets her health back.
Recall.
Yeah.
Okay.
When she
I love the technical call outs
I
here.
do play Overwatch.
You do.
But-
It's true. Just because you play it doesn't mean you know the words.
I don't play Tracer. Are you kidding me?
Calling out the pin. It was quite a pin.
Anyway,
No one can hide.
our DPS are doing an amazing job of tracking her recalls
Absolutely.
to the point where she cannot profit off of
Ooh.
them. Oh,
Big ult,
but that beat. Beautiful. An amazing play from Bowser Hauser.
absolutely. Using this wall to push forward, create some space here. Playing with
Funnily
our
enough,
lines.
Bowser Hauser says she can't play Lucio, and yet we are actively seeing how she is capable of playing Lucio. It's an amazing thing.
Ryan
Oh,
goes down. That's
I may have
two
to
for
retract my
GFU.
statement.
Oh, come on. Tied once. They're still getting picks here, though.
I'm teasing her.
They're up.
We're best friends. She's
Can they
fine.
make this happen?
Oh,
Still taking picks here. Keeping them staggered.
Solmer.
Ryan
And
is about to get back.
And
Ryan gets back.
Frequency going insane.
Frequency with the snipes on that Tracer. Beautiful.
What an amazing game.
Beautiful.
Score 0-3. Switching sides.
And Glacier is really coming out for their first game of the season.
Absolutely.
Initiating
Absolutely.
match.
I'm interested to
What
see.
a tire.
That's
That's a good tire. Thank you, Kaz. I appreciate it personally.
I don't know who that is, but it's a cool robot. I like robots.
Robots are pretty cool.
They're like my favorite thing of all time.
Should we get
Robots.
into the lore of robots in Overwatch? You think that's something that'll put our viewers to
Sleep?
Cas.
Are we gonna say sleep? Why?
yeah to see? I got
There's
distracted
no
by
thing in the bell. There's no thing in the
it's
bell.
a fake bell.
It's a fake bell.
That's
Ugh.
unfortunate.
We've been lied to. How? I'm so confused. Why couldn't they just?
Because they didn't think that we were as thorough as we are.
Where are they?
They're probably gone.
Oh, they're all the
Started-
way up at the.
Yeah.
So glad that our spectator cam operator really knows what's going on. It's not just looking at weird bells.
To play on a map well, you need to know a map well.
Absolutely, I've been saying this.
And I really do think that our gameplay will change now that we know what the interior of that bell looks like.
I agree. I agree. Strategic bell check.
Look, I'm not just a pretty face. I know how to make plays.
I believe you.
And I
I've
will
seen it.
I will incorporate that bell into one of our plays at some
I
point.
I can't wait. That's gonna be so cool.
Oh, it looks like GFU brought out a Widow as well. And a Mercy. Mercy's a very interesting choice right now.
Yeah. Ooh, counter snipe on GFU's Widow there. All right. GFU is down 2.
GFU is really playing behind payload, trying
Down
to use that
3
for
now.
cover. I really love
Yeah.
when we talk over each other. I think we're doing really good at
We're
that.
really good at that.
I'm sure everybody's understanding every word we're saying.
A little setup here. GFU's trying to regain this high ground, but it looks like Arissa's kind of just walking in by herself here. She's getting cornered by the entire team. She able to get out? Big cleanse
Aretha
from
is a tough
Kiriko.
character, but taking on
But-
a full team 1v5 can be pretty rough in every sense.
That's pretty difficult.
Mercy tried to go for the res, but Jimmy absolutely shut it down.
Glacier just clearing this enemy team. Another counter snipe.
Holy!
Beautiful snipe. Wow.
Frequency going absolutely insane.
Crazy
You know,
on the Widow
I
sticks.
sometimes think I can play Widow, and then I watch this and realize I can't.
You dare touch my property?
Oh,
Ooh.
so close on that snipe.
Ooh. Nice. Get out there. Good. Ooh. Solmac got picked by GFU's Widow.
Oh,
ball
and
going
he
for
brought
our
out the
Widow.
ball to go dive on ours.
That ball is really messing up Glacier's line here. Getting in between supports and our Rhine. Nice little boop there. Ooh,
Jimmy won't
another
let that
snipe.
ball get in the way of protecting his supports, though. Their support. They're very protective over him.
Absolutely.
If you're not protective over your support, it's very easy to lose the game. What a kill from Hauser.
Nice.
Man, I'm going to end up
Pushing in with that
doxing way
Rhine.
too many
Ooh.
people.
They picked Rhine there. There's another for GFU. Glacier is down 2. Man. Yarsa is absolutely taking out Solmac. That is 3 times now. Jimmy Carter switching to Diva now, changing up the game a little bit here.
Diva can be a little bit easier to shred, but her mobility will give a lot to Jimmy.
Absolutely. Sort of a counter dive situation, maybe specifically for that Widow, has been picking
Well, exactly.
Glacier supports fairly actively. Nice turret placement there. Gonna do a lot against that ball, at least keep him distracted. Jimmy Carter trying to go in, but taking a lot of damage, forced to back out here. Oh, missed
During
the
the
ult
ult
there.
setup
Did
too.
not hit the button though, so still have that.
Still have it.
Nice little pick there.
Ooh, we've
Ooh.
got frequency on the Reaper now.
Man, that fire doing a lot to just keep those
For
supports from
sure.
auto healing.
That's with how much this Ashe is getting
Widow's
UM on
behind.
fire. I do think that a Kiriko would be helpful now
Yeah,
with her
Gets to
ability
do
to
that.
cleanse that.
definitely. Jimmy Carter clearing out though. Got both of the snipers. The double sniper with the ball is very interesting.
It is very interesting, but I imagine with the ball, when he slams, that makes it for some easy picks if you've got 2 really good
Definitely.
snipers.
Maybe not in this spot of the map though. It's pretty
No,
tight.
not in this spot. That hallway can be killer. Depending, I think it's much more set up for a brawl comp
Definitely.
or a Bob. Bob works too.
Well, Bob not really able to pull off much. Kind of in an awkward spot here.
He is.
Ball
Oh, and
getting
ball
wiped
is
out.
down.
Kiriko out of
their
position.
Widow is down. There goes Kiriko. We've
Glacier's
got
able
Zen
to
and Ashe left.
pick things up, turn things around. Stay another view of that Widow. Her ult is not the most effective ult unless the Widow's good. Doesn't really
Widow's
do much
ult?
for your team. Yeah, it's only
Yeah,
really good for her.
it can help. I do like getting it when you're getting towards the end of a game, popping it before, if they're very clearly like regrouping.
Yeah,
So then you know what direction they're coming from.
yeah.
Makes it so they can't surprise you very well, or if you've got a sim, they can set up their turrets where they're
Ooh.
going to come from.
Ouch. Popped the ult, but didn't get it on the ground.
That is one of the things I hate the most about Lucia's ult.
Yeah,
It can take a while to build up his ult too. Then making it so he can get killed before he even uses it while losing that ult, it's kind of ridiculous.
definitely.
Oh. And ball really seemed to be the pick for GFU.
Absolutely. Really changed things up. Might see a Diva contest here. Diva contest,
Might.
probably with an
Diva's
ult here.
got bombs.
Seeing an ult. Can it make something happen?
Oh.
Nothing happened, but we got the sim wall coming out. They are still in overtime here.
Oh, going for the supports first. We've got
Nice.
Zen down.
Good picks. Good picks.
We've got ball
It's
left.
just ball left.
Could pop some of those turrets and slow him down. Never
Nice.
mind. We don't even
Not
need
needed.
him slowed down.
Just got them melted. They will not get back in time.
Beautiful job from
Beautiful.
University of Montana Glacier.
And that is
That
the third
3-0?
and final game.
Ooh.
Glacier wins. That was a close last game.
That was close. That was good.
That ball
That
went
ball
crazy.
really did throw us off of. What am I trying to say? Throw us for a loop. There
Yeah.
you go. For a little bit there.
definitely. But I think once the team focused on the snipers, got them out of the way, then
Absolutely.
supports.
And
ball
then
couldn't.
leave ball by himself, and he would have had to C9 if he wanted to go get any health, so he just had to keep running in his little hamster circles.
Absolutely.
Well, if anybody from GFU is listening, all fun and games. Love you guys.
Yeah. Hope
Promise.
to,
We're besties.
yeah.
Oh, okay. We're getting told to leave. So
Yeah.
I hope you guys have an
haven't
absolutely
done this
lovely
before, right?
night. Thank you for tuning in. Plug yourselves. Sup, I'm Young Blitz. What? That's it. I'm Young Blitz. Best support
I'm
main out here.
Athena. Thank you for watching. Yay!